The candle flames along the narrow corridor writhed like serpents caught between wind and prayer, their wavering coils casting red-gold shadows on damp stone. The salt-scented air of dragonstone seeped through every crack, mingling with the sting of burning resin and the faint, scorched odor of blood that clung to Melisandre's robes. She moved in measured silence, her scarlet skirts brushing the rushes, vibrant against the gloom that clamped the island fortress in perpetual half-night. The castle's halls had witnessed many conspiracies since Aegon's landing, but none so audacious as the design she nurtured now, a design so perilous that she scarcely dared give it voice even in the solitude of her own thoughts. Through ash-veiled memory she recalled her first glimpse of the vision, a crownless king rising naked from a river of blackened water, eyes alight with dusk-purple flame, a song of ice shattering upon his breath. The flames had spoken his name in hissing Valyrian, Rhaegar, over and over until the stone of her chamber seemed to melt. And when she knelt to ask her lord if this was the prince that was promised, the blaze had flared white-hot, so bright, she had screamed. Azor Ahai reborn, the flames had sworn, but chained beyond the veil of death. Resurrect him, and the long night may end. Yet the price was steep. Only the blood of kings could unlock the doors of death. And the door lay leagues away in the vaults beneath the Red Keep, where the remains of Rhaegar Targaryen had lain in mute dishonor, since Robert's young Thunderhammer had felled him at the Trident. To steal what the usurper had tried to bury forever, an emblem of the realm's old loyalties and old fears, would require guile and boldness in measures large enough to drown a crown. But Melisandre had burned away fear long ago in the slave pits of Asshai, and in its place stood the unbending certainty of divine mission. Above her, the sea's deep murmur rose, thunder rolling against cliffs in dark communion. She paused at a fork in the corridor, waiting until the outer door creaked. Footsteps echoed, hard leather on flagstones, the drag of a fur-lined cloak. Davos Seaworth emerged from the stairwell, face gaunt, silver stubble gleaming in the torchlight. The Onion Knight's gaze fixed on her with wary respect that bordered on dread. "Your Grace sent for me," he said, though Melisandre noted the king's title did not pass his lips. The smuggler never addressed her directly unless commanded. Still, that suited her. She did not need the comfort of the small folk's faith, only their obedience. "His Grace will meet us in the chamber of the Painted Table," she replied. "There is a voyage to discuss, one none save you can make swiftly." She did not blink, or secretly. Davos' eyes narrowed. He feared the Red Woman's schemes, but he feared for Stannis more. And love, she knew, can harness desperate courage. He fell into step without another word. Beyond the painted oak doors, Stannis Baratheon leaned over the vast map table carved into the likeness of Westeros, his lantern jaw shadowed, fingers pressed into the green pine shorelines as though he would squeeze truth from the wood. The crown of driftwood and black iron rested at his elbow, unworn, perhaps because its weight was dwarfed by all he carried unseen. Shattered loyalty, the memory of brothers' laughter, a realm disintegrating like old parchment. Near him stood Maester Pylos holding an unraveling scroll. Lords Velaryon and Celtigar murmured by the hearth, their faces pale in the ruby glow from Melisandre's choker. Stannis glanced up. "Davos, you will sail to Blackwater Bay by nightfall," he said for closing preamble. "You will take one ship, the Black Betha alone, no banner on her mast. When you dock, you will deliver my letter to a man named Qyburn at a certain cellar door on the Street of Sisters. He is expecting you. Ben Bawa." Davos' scarred lips parted, suspicion flaring like a struck tinder. "Qyburn? I know the name. A maester stripped of his chain for dark experiments. A healer of uncommon skill, so I'm told." Stannis returned, gray eyes unblinking. "He knows the hidden ways through the keep and the crypts beneath. He will guide you to relics we require." The smuggler's throat bobbed. "Relics, my liege?" "Bones," Melisandre said. The single word snapped across the chamber, startling the coals. "Bones that once belonged to a dragon prince." She folded her hands. "When they are in my keeping, R'hllor shall breathe fire into them. I have seen it in the flames." The silence afterward felt alive, stretching until timber groaned in the rafters. Lord Celtigar's ringed fingers drummed the hilt of his sword. Valerian muttered a prayer to the drowned god under his breath. Davos' one remaining hand closed around empty air as if seeking a pouch of onions to barter with a skeptical universe. Stannis' voice sliced through the dread. "If the Lord of Light wills my cause, I shall not balk at his methods. Rhaegar's corpse is a ransom paid for victory, one Robert unknowingly gave us long ago. We will claim it now." To Davos he added, "You swore to serve me in all things, good and ill. Will you do this?" The Onion Knight stared down at the painted river trident winding across the table under a miniature weirwood. Perhaps he remembered his own sons lost at Blackwater, their charred ribs rising with the tide. Perhaps he saw another pyre being built. "Bones cannot end a war," he murmured. Melisandre stepped forward, her ruby pulsing. "The bones of a prince reborn as Azor Ahai can end all wars. Darkness gathers. Only R'hllor's champion can cut it away." She lifted her chin. "Say yes, smuggler, and sail at once. Hesitate, and your king's cause, indeed the whole world, may founder." A sigh like sails shrinking in a calm escaped him. "At once then," Davos said. His single word was raw iron beaten into submission. Before dawn's first blush, the Black Betha slipped into a ghost-gray sea, her holds empty save for a tar-sealed keg of aromatic pine. Her smuggling cargo? Should the city guard demand a manifest? But the true cargo traveled in Davos' mind. A letter sealed with a snarling crowned stag, promising gold and safe haven for a disgraced maester who trafficked in the secrets of flesh and death. With every oarstroke the castle of Dragonstone dwindled behind, a jagged blot rising from mist. Ahead, King's Landing shimmered like a mirage of iron and corruption paling beneath its golden domes. Beyond the narrow sea, in the murder-haunted alleys of Qarth, Daenerys Targaryen sensed a ripple in the tapestry of dream and memory. It came upon her in the humid quiet before sunrise, while silver bells chimed in her hair, and her dragons slept coiled around one another beneath the shadow of ancient stelos. A sudden roaring in her head, the taste of ash and roses. Visions flickered, her brother Rhaegar kneeling by a cradle, singing of Rhaella and iceborne prophecy, her own hands aflame yet unburned. She jolted awake with a name on her lips. Beric. No, another. A brother now lost to years in exile. Rhaegar. When morning blotched the sky, she told Ser Jorah of the dream, though she softened its sharpest edges for fear that the night would see madness rather than omen. Jorah's frown cut deep. "Dreams are dust on a hot wind," he said. "But if they steer your Gracie's thoughts west, they cannot be wholly ill." He spoke kindly, but doubt hung in his bare brown eyes. Daenerys thanked him and strode away, chest tight. "Are you coming back, Rhaegar? Was I not enough?" The question stung, but beneath them. If her brother lived again, perhaps dragons might fly side by side once more, under one banner. The Iron Throne would echo with the songs of House Targaryen reborn. Still, she wondered whether resurrection could cost as much as birth had, her own torn from her mother's dying body on Dragonstone's storm-lashed night. Life demanded life. Who was paying the price? In the ice-caked fastness of the wall, Jon Snow stood high atop the King's Road Tower, cloak snapping in needles of wind. Letters traveled slowly to Castle Black, yet rumor flew quicker than ravens on the wings of traitors and deserters alike. He had overheard a Southron steward whispering that a red witch served Stannis, that she could conjure fire from her fingertips and speak with the shadows. Now ghosts from an older war were said to stir in King's Landing. Jon felt an ache behind his ribs like a bruise pressed by winter. He remembered Lord Eddard's hushed tales by the hearth. Prince Rhaegar was a gentleman, a harp hidden beneath silver plate, loved by lords and common folk, until he snatched the Stark maid and brought the realm to ruin. "Remember this, Jon," Ned had said. "Greatness can wear a gentle face, but wield savage ruin." The boy Jon had imagined Rhaegar as a tragic hero. The man could not decide whether to despise or pity him. But if Melisandre truly meant to raise the prince, what then? Would the lords rally to him? Would Robert's heir Joffrey yield? Would Rob's cause collapse without a sword drawn? Jon felt dizzy at the cascading what-ifs. The realm below seemed a board scattered with shards of obsidian, and every choice cut both ways. A horn blast rolled across the courtyard, jolting him back. He descended to command the new recruits. Duty first, always. Still, as he clattered down iron-bound steps, he could not shake the whisper at the back of his mind. Blood of the dragon, blood of the wolf, entwined in secrets only the dead kept. King's Landing lay sweltering under late summer heat, when Davos guided the Black Betha into a forgotten cove north of the Mudgate. He wore a coarse spun cloak dyed a muddy drab, hood drooping over cropped gray hair. 2 oarsmen rowed him toward the city's seaward wall, where a drainage culvert spewed night soil into rippling black. He slipped inside, boots squelching through slime, torch clenched between teeth. When he emerged in a dusty storeroom of cracked amphorae and rotted casks, a gaunt figure waited, eyes pale as drowned pearls. "Key burning?" "My Lord Seaworth," the ex-maester said without greeting, voice as soft as powdered bone. "You bring Stannis Baratheon's letter?" Davos passed it unopened. Qyburn broke the seal, scanned the lines, and smiled like a corpse, remembering warmth. "His Grace requests a retrieval, discreet and swift. You will have it." He beckoned. "Follow, Dortite." Through catacombs heavy with myrrh, they traveled, passing iron-bound doors etched with Valyrian glyphs, cells where rats scurried over splintered chains. Qyburn spoke little, but curiosity burned behind his mild eyes. At last they reached a vault guarded by 2 Lannister men-at-arms. A small purse of gold and a muttered password parted them like curtains. Inside, the prince's sarcophagus rested on a plinth of weirwood. Moonlight leaked through arrow slits, glazing carved dragons with argent sorrow. Davos' stomach nodded. He expected stench rot, but the ebony lid had been sealed with pitch and lead. No odor escaped. Qyburn produced slender tools, humming as he sprang each clasp. When lead hinges whined open, a hush fell colder than a White Harbor winter. Within lay Rhaegar Targaryen, or what time had spared, bone-polished by embalmer's oil, silver-gold hair brittle as old straw. Across his breast, a faded blue cloak embroidered with the sigil of Housestane. The stones of his crown rested beside hollow temples. Yet even in death, the fine bones of his face suggested melancholy and grace. Davos stared, mouth dry. This is treason. This is grave robbery. This is sorcery. He forced his mind to nettles. The oath he had given, the sons he had buried. If Stannis must be king, the path wound through hell. Qyburn and 2 mute acolytes wrapped the corpse in linen steeped in vinegar and pine pitch. They lowered it into a narrow oaken crate, nailed it shut, then sealed the lid with black wax, stamped by Qyburn's sigil. A serpent entwined about a hand. Davos hefted one end. The body weighed less than memory. On the Black Betha's return voyage, moonlight swam on oily waves and silent gulls circled like lost souls. Davos prayed to the Mother for forgiveness, to the Father for judgment, to any god who still heard smuggler prayers. But each time he looked at the crate lashed to the deck, he felt as though the prince might sit up, eyes blazing, demanding why Winter's child carried him across a dark sea. Dragonstone's beach glowed amber where braziers ringed a low altar of black basalt. The night smelled of salt, kelp, and iron. Melisandre stood barefoot in the sand, hair unbound so wind could whip it into a crimson banner. Around her gathered Stannis, Davos, Lady Khaleesi, and 100 knights sworn to Dragonstone's banner, uncertain watchers to history's turning. The crate rested upon the altar. Melisandre raised her arms, crimson sleeves fluttering like wings. She called aloud to Rhaegar in the high tongue, invocations older than Aegon, drawn from scrolls penned in the glooms of Asshai. The sea hissed and sparks spiraled skyward. She turned to Stannis. The king's blood must quicken the flame. Stannis did not flinch, only drew a dagger, its stag-hilt dull beneath torchlight. He pressed the point into the flesh above his thumb until blood welled. With grim deliberation he squeezed, letting drops patter upon Rhaegar's shrouded brow. Yet Melisandre's ruby flared brighter still, and she gestured for more. Davos stepped forward. "Is there no other way?" Stannis' stare cut him to marrow. "None that matters." He sliced the palm of his other hand and bled onto the corpse until the linen soaked dark. When he swayed, Melisandre steadied his wrist, murmured a cantrip, and flames leapt from braziers in a circling roar. The linen erupted in sheets of blue fire, searing hot but whip-fast. Spectators gasped, shielding faces. Within the blaze, the shape beneath bucked as muscles long dead spasmed. A howl, part human, part furnace blast, ripped through the night. Then the fire collapsed into itself, embers spiraling outward and winking to ash. Smoke drifted away on the sea wind. Where Rhaegar's blackened wrappings had been, a naked man lay curled on the altar, skin bright pink like newborn flesh, hair a luminous fall of silver soaking across shoulders. His eyes opened. They were lilac-streaked with halos of red. They burned. Every knight and lady present fell to their knees, save Davos, who staggered back in terror. Melisandre stepped forward, heart hammering. Rhaegar drew a ragged breath, ribs lifting, and his gaze fixed on Stannis. "Brother," he whispered, though they had never been kin. Stannis swallowed audibly. "I am no dragon Targaryen," he rasped. The reborn prince pushed himself upright, movements fluid though tremor sharp. He looked down at his own hands. Scar-free. Perfect. "I remember water," he said softly, voice like a clear harp note. "The trident's kiss, my blood blooming around me, armor dragging me dark, then roses burning black." His eyes lifted to Melisandre. "And your fire pulled me through." The red woman bowed her head. "You are Azor Ahai reborn. Lightbringer walks beside you. Come, prince, claim the sword and the realm." Gigantic gasps rose from the crowd as three shadowy shapes swept overhead. Dragons carved of smoke and starlight, their roaring a thunder in minds rather than ears. When they vanished into air, every soul on the beach felt smaller than an ember on the wind. Rhaegar slid from the altar, Melisandre's cloak draped over his shoulders. He strode toward Stannis, barefoot on black sand, leaving footprints that smoked faintly. "Who sits the Iron Throne?" he asked. Stannis clenched his wounded hand. "A boy named Joffrey Baratheon, though his blood is Lannister." He paused. "My brother Robert is dead, as are Renly, Eddard Stark, Lord Tywin soon enough if rumor speaks true. The realm shrinks under warring claims." Rhaegar breathed deep, and steam coiled from his lips, although the night was warm. "I left Westeros drowned in blood. I will not see it drown again." He set a hand upon Stannis' shoulder. "You fought for Robert once. Fight for me now. Together we shall end the war swiftly." Stannis stiffened, jaw knots flexing, yet a flicker of awe danced where obstinacy lived. "My cause is just," he said, but the words rang hollow. Rhaegar's gaze made him uncertain for the first time since Storm's End fell. Melisandre watched, pulse hammering like war drums. In her mind's eye she saw a blade gleaming in sunrise, 1,000 armored men kneeling, a night sky rent by comet's tail. And beyond that victory, a darkness deeper still, crawling from northern ice. The prince would burn bright, but fire draws the shadow's hunger. 2 days later, ravens blackened the western sky, scattering from Dragonstone in every direction. They carried parchment rings emblazoned with a crimson three-headed dragon, encircled by a ring of 7-pointed stars, the sigil of Rhaegar renewed, wedded to the creed of peace he had sung in the yard at Summerhall years before. Lords high and low read the tidings with tremoring fingers. The Prince of Dragonstone returns, risen by the Lord of Light, to halt the carnage. Lay down arms and join his march, or perish. The small council in King's Landing convened in panic. Cersei's cheeks blazed as she hurled the scroll across the table. "Witch spawn lies!" she shrieked. But even the Kingsguard's white cloaks flinched. Lord Varys murmured that sightings of a silver-haired bard near King's Landing had been reported. Pycelle quavered to pray. Only Tyrion studied the crimson wax with a quick, detached fascination. mind already leaping ahead to guesses and gambits. Far in River Run, Robb Stark's war counselors argued under weepy rain. Could honor allow them to ally with a dragon he should hate? The young wolf weighed vengeance for his father against the hope of peace for his bannermen. Mendy screaming while we chase crowns, he muttered to great John Umber. If this prince can end it. He broke off. Mind a snarl. At Storm's End, the lords who once followed Renly gaped when a white-haired man stepped through the castle gate, wrapped in a cloak of falling stars. Gendry Waters, hammer slung across sun-browned shoulders, stared at him, like a child glimpsing a forgotten father in a stranger's face. Rhaegar offered him a smile tinged with apology, and clapped his arm. I will need strong smiths to forge a realm anew, he said. Stand with me, lad, and your worth shall never be questioned. Gendry's answering grin felt like sunrise on a field of corpses. As summer wilted into bruised autumn, Rhaegar marched beneath banners half-remembered. Martell's sons beside Targaryen dragons, Baratheon stags crowned anew but flanking the prince, instead of hunting him. At his side rode Melisandre, her red silks whispering spells, her eyes ever on the distant horizon, where winter's edge crept south like a silent tide. Stannis rode too, beneath a banner sewn hastily. One half-crowned stag, the other red-gold dragon, his jaw clenched but his sword unsheathed for the prince's justice. Behind them thundered columns of men once fatal enemies, sworn in blood and fire to a resurrected heir. When they reached the ruins of the inn at the crossroads, Rhaegar halted the column. He dismounted and strode alone to the charred foundation where rumors said the brothers Clegane had slaughtered small folk weeks prior. In the ash he knelt, pressing fingertips to blackened earth. Remember their suffering. He murmured so only Melisandre heard. Remember why songs turn bitter. He stood, firelight in silver eyes. No more songs will die unfinished. No more babes shall burn. That night by campfire, he took up a battered harp with silver strings. He sang of quiet gardens and moonlit halls, of a realm united not by fear but by shared grief healed. Hardened Seleswords wept. Lordlings who had never known his voice sat entranced. In every note rang a promise. Of peace, of reckoning, of dawn. Melisandre watched the dragon prince bathed in firelight, and feared her own heart might thaw. But warmth could weaken as surely as steel rusts. She closed her eyes, seeking the flames beyond the flames. There she saw a pale figure in ice-forged armor, urging whites across fields of snow. Saw castles tumble beneath blizzards so fierce they turned stone to powder. The song of peace would be brief unless fire marched north. When she opened her eyes, Rhaegar was still singing. North of the Trident, the royal army led by Lord Tywin Lannister prepared to meet the dragons reborn. The Lion of Casterly Rock had grown gaunter since the Blackwater, yet his will remained ironclad. He would not yield realm or daughter to a ghost. Across muddy fields lit by bone-white moon, camp torches flickered, lances of trembling light against encroaching dark. In his pavilion Tywin wrote orders for flanking maneuvers, his pen scratching like claws. Yet news reached him with each passing hour. Harrenhal's new castellan, Lord Bolton, had turned cloaks, offering fealty to Rhaegar. The Freys withheld crossing at the Twins. Tully outriders trailed his supply lines, nipping like trout at a lion's tail. Still, Tywin pressed on, for retreat would shrivel Lannister prestige. Better to bleed in glory than slink to Casterly Rock a beaten pride. At sunrise, horns brayed from twin hills. Mist drifted off the river like torn shrouds. Rhaegar rode to the fore across dew-drenched grass, Stannis to his right, Melisandre to his left, the ruby at her throat, pulsing like a second heart. Behind them rolled banners of dragon, stag, and sun. On the opposite ridge, Lannister crimson rippled, pricked by golden lions. Tywin advanced to parley, flanked by Kevan and the Mountain, Sir Gregor, towering, visor snarling. Rhaegar dismounted before the lines and walked halfway alone. Tywin met him, eyes like stone coins. You died, the lion said flatly. Rhaegar inclined his head. Some debts transcend death. He gestured to the fields. This bloodshed profits only the stranger. Help me end it. Bend the knee, Lord Tywin, and retain your lands, your titles. Your grandson Tommen can yet thrive in a realm at peace. A faint tick flickered near Tywin's right eye. My house bends to no ghost conjured by witchcraft. Robert's rebellion crowned us lions of the realm. I will not trade that crown for chains golden or otherwise. Then you will trade it for fire, Melisandre warned. Voices cold as the ashes of hundreds. Gregor Clegane laughed. A wet, ugly sound, raised his sword, and pointed at Rhaegar. Burn me, and see how your king sings headless, he growled. That single act shattered parley. War drums rolled. Arrows hissed. From Melisandre's lips poured words that scorched the air, and a storm of flame erupted before Rhaegar, forging a barrier too hot for arrows to breach. Men cried out as swords sagged, molten. Through the mayhem Stannis roared commands, ordering archers to target the gaps between shields. Tywin wheeled round, barking at his men, but confusion rippled. Many had heard the prince's song the night before from deserters returning to their banners, and doubt gnawed at the lion's roar. The battle stretched through noon. Rhaegar led charges as though never having died, blade swift as heartbreak, each stroke parried with minimal cruelty. When he disarmed one knight, he bade the man rise and depart unscathed. The sight sowed more turmoil than a dozen kills. Soon Lannister lines buckled not from casualties but from vision. They could not see why they fought. By dusk, the golden banners lay tangled in the mire, and Lord Tywin's pavilion burned behind him. He commanded a retreat up the western road, his roar hoarse and brittle. Rhaegar ordered pursuit only as far as the Blackwater's ford, then called halt. Mercy, he told his men, is the sharpest sword. Yet mercy would not spare them winter's threat. In the silent aftermath, Melisandre approached the prince where he knelt near a wounded rider. Your victory shines, she said. But dawn's glow fades unless we march north. I have seen your sword ablaze at the wall, shining against night's true heart. The war for the throne is but the morning's skirmish. The night war awaits. Then Rhaegar met her eyes. Sweat and soot streaking his high cheeks. I have known prophecy all my life, priestess. It led me to my doom once. Why should I trust it now? Because you have walked beyond the world of breath and returned bearing its mark. She touched his chest where a faint scar glowed like a coal. Because dragonfire alone cannot melt ice that hungers for life. You will need fire and light and songs of winter wolves. Then Jon Snow's face flashed unbidden in Rhaegar's mind. A boy he had glimpsed only once in a fever dream while drifting between life and oblivion. A boy with eyes of gray granite and sorrow, deeper than the sea. My son, he whispered before memory corrected him. Not son, but nephew, or perhaps something stranger still. He rose. Send riders north to Winterfell and to the Wall. Bid them carry word. The prince rides to treat with the king in the north and the Lord Commander. If they join me, I will break the Iron Throne and forge a realm where all men may live unafraid. If they refuse, then I will still march, for winter does not wait on crowns. Then? Melisandre nodded, satisfied, yet weariness edged her smile. Visions changed like wind on the stepstones. She had felt the pull of another hand in the flames, an unseen puppeteer tugging both ice and fire toward collision. Whether that hand belonged to a god, a demon, or the secret heart of man, she could not say. So autumn's last warmth bled into chills that whispered of long nights ahead. Rhaegar's host swelled with every mile, gathering Starks, river lords, even weary reachmen eager to lay down arms. At Maidenpool, they found silent sisters burying refugees, and Rhaegar labored beside them, shoveling earth until his hands blistered, refusing salve as penance. Songs spread like seeds on the wind, the prince who dug graves, the dragon who wept for strangers. Yet in shadowed corners, darker tales bred. Of unnatural fire, of a man risen from dust, of a red witch shaping destiny for reasons no mortal could grasp. Men spoke of the Lord of Light demanding sacrifice. They remembered Renly's ghost, whispered to have fallen to a shadow birthed from Melisandre's womb. Fear walked with hope, twin wolves sharing one cloak. And far to the north, in an abandoned keep beyond the wall, the Night King stirred at the shifting in the world's skein. Ancient eyes opened, stars reflecting in pupils of glacial blue, and a voice like cracking permafrost rumbled, "He comes!" The dead around him answered with silence, yet the wind howled approval. On the banks of the Trident, where Prince Rhaegar once fell, a new camp rose, tents of crimson and gold, of direwolf gray, of stag crowned with dragon. At dusk, Rhaegar walked alone to the water's edge. Weeds now swayed where his armor had sunk, reeds bent under gentle current. He knelt, touched the cool surface, and watched ripples spread. "I was born here anew," he whispered, "and here I swore to change the world." He looked west, where the setting sun gilded Dragonstone's distant dream. "Father, Mother, Elia, I failed you, but let this birth redeem the former." He closed his eyes, hearing only water and wind and the quiet crackle of Melisandre's distant pyres. Behind him, footsteps paused. Stannis cleared his throat. "A rider has returned from the north. Your audience is requested at River Run. The king in the north will hear you." Rhaegar stood, brushing sand from his knees. "Then we ride at dawn." "And the Iron Throne?" Rhaegar followed the flow downstream, as though seeing into days ahead. "If we succeed," he said, "the realm will need no throne, only a hearth large enough for all humankind to share. If we fail, none shall sit any throne again." His smile was pained but determined. "We will not fail." Stannis grunted, the sound halfway between derision and reluctant faith. Rhaegar turned toward camp, where torches flickered like fireflies. His army awaited, and beyond, the frozen winds whispered his true test. But for the first time since the Trident's chill embrace, his heart beat strong and sure. He had returned not to chase lost songs, but to compose the final verse of an age. Melisandre watched from afar, her ruby pulsing. In her mind's eye she saw flames weaving into the aurora of northern sky, saw a slender blade drawn from a snowy sheath by a wolf's hand, burning red-hot D. Two songs mingled there, ice laced with fire, rising as one immolating crescendo. Perhaps the prince's mercy would not dull the sword. Perhaps compassion might temper steel instead of weakening it. Perhaps. She exhaled and let the night enfold her. The war for Dawn had begun long before she was born, and would outlive any crown. But if she had read the fires true, a reborn dragon and a wolf of winter would stand together beneath the bleeding stars, and their cord would be bright enough to blind the darkness rooting in men's souls. She prayed then. Softly, fiercely, that when the hour came and shadows lunged, Rhaegar Targaryen would remember the graves he dug, the songs he sang, the promise he made on banks washed in his own resurrected tears. And she prayed that the God who rose him would not demand more than even a dragon could bear to pay. The torches burned on, crackling, sibilant, while the trident whispered memories beneath the hush of drifting leaves. And high above, pale ripples shimmered in the heavens, harbingers of a winter no wall could halt, gleaming like the ghosts of swords yet drawn, battles yet fought, songs yet sung. Brine-lacquered leaves drifted in long spiraling eddies along the banks of the Green Fork, as the column wound north, torches bobbing like captive stars in the dusk. Even the horses seemed hushed, ears flicking at the murmurs of far-off owls and the damp slap of river against pilings. Rhaegar kept the pace at a patient walk, allowing the weary footmen of three disparate armies to share fires, bread, and wary conversation. Every league northward felt less like a march of conquest and more like a pilgrimage, a gradual baptism in chilly air and harder soil. Once, at dusk, the prince reined in atop a low rise and watched the banners roll past. The direwolf of Stark, the crowned stag of Stannis, the resurrected dragon ringed in seven-pointed stars. Martell's sunbursts now stitched to fields of crimson in silent homage to the wife Robert had burned from memory. He thought of Elia, her shy smile, her children's tiny fists curling around his fingers, and wondered whether she would have walked this road at his side or counseled him to lay aside prophecy for the simpler law of graves. Melisandre joined him, crimson skirts whispering across brittle heather. She studied the ranks filing past, her ruby pulsing like a second heart. Men who once swore to kill one another now share salt pork, she observed. Fire can fuse even cold iron, if the flames burn hot enough. He raised a brow. Or consume it whole. Steel that never leaves the forge is useless. She traced a circle in the air, leaving a faint ember trail only he could see. Winter creeps while you hesitate. At River Run you must not merely woo the Wolf King. You must bind him. His heart is the anvil. Strike truly. Rhaegar's gaze drifted to the dark line of forest edging the river. Wolves do not take kindly to collars, then offer a crown in its stead. He said nothing. The wind carried campfire laughter to them, thin and tentative, as though men practiced joy like a forgotten instrument. River Run's towers loomed slate-gray against a pewter sky inked with unseasonal thunderheads. Rain began as a fine mist, beating on trout banners and direwolf standards alike, before it gathered heft enough to drum helm rims and dampen even Lord Umber's booming jests. Inside the gatehouse Robb Stark waited, flanked by Great John, Mage Mormont, and Catelyn, whose worry lined her face like fine cracks in winter ice. The young wolf's auburn curls clung to his brow, and though he stood ramrod straight, every heartbeat seemed to reverberate through him, a silent drum of uncertainty. When Rhaegar rode beneath the portcullis, he dismounted without flourish and crossed the courtyard, cloak of falling stars trailing rainwater. He knelt, not to a throne, but to the earth where Ned Stark's blood had once run in rivulets down Sept Baelor's steps. The gesture rippled through the onlookers like lightning through ironwood. Robb advanced 2 paces. "You seek my sword," he said, his voice scratchy from long counsels. "Yet bend the knee to no king save yourself. What would you of House Stark?" Rhaegar rose. "Justice first, peace thereafter. I would see the realm whole, but I have learned a crown can shatter a realm as swiftly as a sword. I do not ask your knee. I ask your hand." He extended his open palm. Rain spattered across his lifeline. "Join me." Silence thickened. Torches hissed. Greyjohn shifted, plate creaking. Catelyn's breath caught. Then Robb placed his gloved hand against the prince's. "On one condition," he said. "You ride to Winterfell and bear witness to every life winter has stolen while Southrons played at thrones. And you swear, before gods old and new, that the North will never again be ruled from afar without its consent." "And oh." Rhaegar's fingers tightened. "Done." A roar of relief surged through the yard, some joyous, some uncertain, but steel rang back in scabbards instead of out. That night, under dripping willow eaves, 2 kings feasted from the same trenchers. Wine flowed thin, supplies were slim, but the mood bubbled thicker than arbor gold. Stannis sat stiffly at the high table, jaw twitching each time a northern lord toasted Prince Rhaegar, son of the dragon and savior of men. Yet he kept his silence, nursing a cup of watered wine in calculation. Catelyn found Rhaegar afterward in the Godswood, beneath reddening leaves that glimmered like embers against black bark. "My lord," she ventured, voice carrying the hush of moss, "I would know Lyanna's fate from your own lips, not from songs or Robert's wrath." Her hands coiled in her cloak, knuckles white. "Did you love her?" His breath misted between them. "Love grows from seed to tree and sun and seasons. Ours was a wildflower blooming overnight in a storm. Beautiful, yes, but fragile, ripped up by the roots ere summer." He lowered his gaze to a gnarled face carved in the heart tree's trunk. "If I had foreseen the river of blood her petals would unleash, I would have cast them to the wind." Tears rimmed her lashes, though anger kept them at bay. "Then tell the realm," she whispered. Let truth cauterize old wounds before the night's cold can pry them wider. He inclined his head. Soon. But some truths are daggers. Draw them too quickly, and they slip. And now. Beyond the twins, far to the west, Tywin Lannister retreated behind the gold-marbled walls of Casterly Rock, pacing like a caged lion. Scaven halls rang with the hammering of new forges and the thunder of fresh levies drilling by torchlight. Yet news from King's Landing only soured his temper further. Coin shipments had slowed, crown revenues bled by siege and blockade, common folk whispering that wildfire still lurked beneath the city, waiting to claim usurper and pretender alike. Queen Cersei sent frantic ravens. Joffrey's temper worsened, his cruelties multiplying like flies on carrion. Tyrion, however, read the reports with growing fascination. A resurrected prince wielding mercy instead of fear, a war-torn realm flocking to him. Chaos, yes, but chaos with a strange gravity. If a dwarf could hitch himself to such a star, what might rise from the resulting dawn? He penned a covert letter to Varys, and another to his old sellsword Bronn, then sealed them with wax, bearing not the lion but a hand in black. At Castle Black, fresh fallen snow glittered under pallid moonlight as Jon Snow read the prince's message by the glow of a guttering candle. Sam stood beside him, parchment in trembling hands. To the Lord Commander and the King in the North, Jon read aloud, "I ride beneath banners united in singular purpose. To face a foe neither crown nor gold can sway. Dragonglass and Valyrian steel will be our coin. I invite you to meet me at Winterfell before the full moon wanes." Sam exhaled, fogging his spectacles. A Rhaegar Targaryen come again. It's like old Nan's stories got drunk with Maester Aemon's prophecies. And so. Jon folded the letter. Stories don't march with 20,000 men. Yet his voice was distant. The parchment felt heavier than armor. Rhaegar. Lyanna. Oaths were never content to haunt merely the past. He saddled his gray ghost loping behind and rode south with a retinue of rangers. The wall dwindled in their wake like a jagged crack leaking wind. Deep down Jon felt the crack widening within himself, too. Between duty to the Night's Watch and a howl in his blood answering some call he could not name. At Winterfell's battered gates, snowflakes drifted like pale moths around lantern horns. Bran sat in his carved weirwood chair near the stone steps, thin blanket tucked across idle legs. His dark eyes, ancient with new knowing, tracked the torches along the King's Road long before sentries spotted them. "They come," he said softly to Osha, who adjusted the tangle of reeds woven in his lap blanket. "Who?" "Father's friend and father's ghost," Bran murmured. "And a song sharper than swords." When Rhaegar's host crested the final ridge, torches painting the snow in rivulets of copper, the boy's breath caught. Somewhere between heartbeats he tasted cold water lapping at stone and heard a woman crying beneath a tower. All memories lodged in marrow not entirely his own. Robb rode out first, cloak snapping. Rhaegar followed beside him, with Stannis, Melisandre, and a dwindling cadre of sworn shields. Jon and his rangers arrived scarcely an hour later from the north, dusting ice and sweat. On Winterfell's great hall dais, beneath banners of direwolf and dragon newly hung, Rhaegar stood framed by braziers. Jon mounted the steps, each boot scuff echoing. He paused one pace shy. Their eyes met, gray and lilac, winter granite and summer amethyst. No words bridged the hush. It was as if wind itself held breath in the hall's rafters. Then Jon knelt, out of courtesy, not fealty, and rose again. Rhaegar reached, hesitant, and clasped the younger man's forearm. Some spark leapt skin to skin, like static crackling on wool, startling them both. "You carry the North in your gaze," Rhaegar said quietly. "Lyanna would be proud." Robb's brows knit, but Jon only inclined his head. "The North carries weight enough. It needs more than pride. Then let us give it hope." War councils stretched deep into frost-bitten nights, lit by smoky pine resin torches. Davos, Stanny, Lady Mormont, Great John, Tormund Giantsbane, newly arrived with wildling skirmishers, argued strategy while Maester Luwin's successor, Old Grey Maester Malan scribbled feverishly. Dragon-glass spearheads forged at Dragonstone clinked in wooden crates. Valyrian blades were counted. Ice, Widow's Wail, Oathkeeper, Longclaw, each laid upon a woolen map flecked with chalk sigils of undead hosts. Melisandre presided like a crimson comet, eyes blazing each time talk drifted south of the neck. Every arrow spent on Lannisters is one less for the dead. She warned, when the long night falls, none will remember who wore which crown. Robb and Jon exchanged grim glances. Rhaegar, leaning over the table edge, finally spoke. The Night King marches already. My dreams show him gliding across miles of silent snow. If our armies meet him piecemeal, we feed him flesh. Stannis' jaw flexed. And if we march the whole realm to the wall, we leave the south ripe for traitors. He eyed Robb. I know duty, to realm, not sentiment. Rhaegar folded his arms. The realm is these people, this soil, their hearths. If the hearths freeze, thrones melt. A hush followed. In it, Bran's thin voice drifted from a corner, carried by the crackle of flame. He's closer than you think. Every head turned. The boy's pupils had gone near white, irises rimmed by fine cracks of red. Last night I flew over Umber Farms at last hearth. Their ashes, white shadows crawl from the woods, and the cold brings silence before dawn. The council broke into feverish clamor. Rhaegar watched Bran steadily. Can you guide us? Bran blinked, the ancient glaze receding. I can try. But the tree shows paths, not destinations. And every path has blood. A given, murmured Stannis. Word of the Northern Alliance swept south like wildfire on dry rushes. In Casterly Rock's vaulted war room, Tyrion sipped canary wine and traced the line of the King's Road with a stub of charcoal. If they hold Winterfell, the Dragon Prince becomes Northman. If they reach Moat Cailin, the realm splits like a ripe melon. Bronn leaned against the map table. Your sister will spit nails, and then hire the Golden Company. Likely in that order. Tyrion tapped the edge of a box of lead soldiers. But gold wins fewer wars when corpses refuse to stay put. I suggest we let the dead fight the living until both are nicely thinned, and then... A rustle interrupted as Varys glided in, powder still ghosting his sleeves from the secret tunnels. Apologies. A raven arrived. From Old Town. The Citadel reports glass candles burning again. Archmaesters see shapes of snow and flame. He placed the message. The world shifts. One must decide if it's better to sway with the tide or drown beneath it. Tyrion set down his cup. And which path keeps my head attached? That, my dear imp, depends on how deftly you bow. On the Frostwater Flats 3 days ride north of Winterfell. Scouts found the first white outrider, an eyeless man astride a moose, both frozen hard as riverstone. Rhaegar rode out to inspect. One touch of his gloved hand shattered the thing into papery fragments, snow swirling into empty sockets. That night, he stood long upon the battlements, cloak snapping, hands clenched on the walls, as though he might wrest strategy from the stars. Jon approached, boots crunching. A memory come to kill us, he said, gesturing skyward where aurora bands rippled green and silver. Memories wield power, Rhaegar replied. So do songs, yet neither can hold a blade. Jon weighed him in moonlight. Songs gave you an army, but fires burn out, and ice endures. The prince met his gaze. You know what I'm about to ask. Jon's belly clenched. Say it. Ride with me to Hardhome. Meet the free folk gathered there. Bring them south. Every sword, every spear matters, whether it grips loyalty or desperation. Dum? Jon's thoughts leapt to Lord Commander pledges, to black cloaks, and oath-bound hearths. Leave Winterfell now, and the North may think you fled. They fear desertion. The prince's smile was sad. Then let them ride too. An army in motion can still defend its people, better than stone. Jon sighed. We'll need ships. Dragonstone's fleets are already in White Harbor, refitting. He had answer upon answer. Jon almost hated him for it. Almost. Fine. Go. I'll go. But if the Night King strikes while we're gone, then we pray to gods old and new that our brothers can hold one dawn longer. Davos captained the lead carrack, deck coated in rime. Gendry hammered ice from chains, bare-armed despite the cold, roaring a new blacksmith's cadence. Beat the snow, shaped the fire, each strike ringing like defiance against night itself. The harbor smelled of pine pitch and brine-soaked rope. Jon watched from the quarterdeck as wildlings filed aboard, women clutching babes, old warriors missing ears or eyes, youths whose spears were whittled saplings. Among them strode Tormund, beard rimed with frost. "You're sure this dragon prince ain't like his daddy?" he rumbled to Jon. "I'm sure he bleeds." Tormund snorted. So did Mance, and look where his songs landed him. But he clasped Jon's wrist. "Where you go, the free folk follow." The ships unfurled ragged sails painted with hasty sigils. Direwolf, trident, dragon wrapped in a flaming heart. As they slipped north beneath ghost-quiet skies, Melisandre stood at the prow, arms raised. "Lord of light, guide our flame." She intoned, voice carried on wind that smelled of coming snow. The sky answered with a crimson streak low on the horizon, a shard of a dying star, or perhaps the omen of one yet to fall. Back at Winterfell, Bran's dreams drifted beyond mortal ken. He saw a field of blue roses blooming in a blizzard, petals edged with frostfire gold. At their center stood a heartwood weir, limbs stripped bare, bleeding sap the color of Rhaegar's cloak. When Bran touched the trunk, petals blackened. A face formed in the bark. Lyanna's. "Promise me," she whispered, though he could not tell to whom. He jerked awake with sweat freezing against his nape. Outside, hounds bayed. Torchlight flickered between crenellations, alarms. The Night King's vanguard had been spotted at the last river crossing. 4 days' ride. Robb's host scrambled in darkness. Horns blared. Ravens launched. Bran wheeled his chair to the window, heart galloping. Word reached Jon aboard the Stormrunner at dawn. Ravens had found them on cruel wings, message tube iced near solid. As he read, his hands stiffened. Rhaegar watched with furrowed brow. "Winterfell will stand," Jon said hoarsely. "But they need us." Waves slapped hull planks. Davos canted the wheel, gritting teeth as wind howled. "Hardhome will have to wait." "No." Rhaegar's voice cut through the gale. "We split. Half the fleet continues north, half returns with Jon to Bear Island's coast. He can ride from there across the ice bridges, reach Winterfell within 2 days. 2 days and no sleep," Jon muttered. "Sleep when dead," Gendry called from below decks. Melisandre's eyes shone ember bright. "Dead men sleep fitfully." On the barrows south of Last River, Robb arrayed his host in crescent ranks. Snow fell in sweeping curtains, muffling the clash of shields as men braced for nightmare. Bran sat near the ridge's crest in a sledge, mind roving the sky, an eagle's vantage. Through his borrowed eyes he saw white shapes cresting a distant hill. Ranks of frost-encrusted spears glittering like crystal forests in moonlight. The Night King rode at their fore on a stallion of polished ice, cloak swirling with silent malice. Lightning stabbed the clouds, an eerie blue flare. And, where it struck, a dozen weirwood stakes burst from the frozen turf, branches clawing at the wind. Shadows writhed among them. Children of the forest or their echoes, dancing wordless. Bran gasped. The eagle wheeled, shrieking. In the hall of his mind he heard 1,000 leaves rustle. "We remember." He warged back to himself with a gasp, just as Robb's forward scouts crashed onto the ridge, half-frozen, babbling of giants bound in chains of bone, 15 ells tall. Robb drew steel, breath fogging. "So be it. Sound the horns." Jon's horse broke beneath him at the shivering water. He rose limping, blood slicking his thigh, and mounted another without pause. Around him rode a ragged vanguard of Night's Watch rangers and free folk skirmishers, torches whipping sparks into the star-speckled dark. He could almost hear drums on the wind. No, not drums. The pounding of hundreds of dead feet. At dawn's ragged edge, the towers of Winterfell speared the horizon, banners drooping under hoarfrost. Smoke plumed. Signal fires. Jon spurred ahead. Inside the shattered eastern gate he found chaos. Mormont women loosing arrows from windows, Karstark pikemen forming knots. Old Nan leading a gaggle of children toward the crypts with a candlestick raised like a sword. In the Godswood, Bran waited beneath red leaves dusted white. Jon flung himself from his saddle. Snow spraying. How long? An hour, maybe less. Bran's voice was calm, eerie. Rhaegar sails north still. We must bleed the storm until dawn. Jon's gaze flicked to the heart tree. Dawn is hours off. Then make a longer night for them, Bran murmured. Light your fires. Out on the snow-shrouded flats, the Night King halted his host. From a ridge, he surveyed Winterfell's smoking battlements. He lifted an arm, and silence every bit as heavy as war's roar settled. Whites rustled at the ready. Spears of ice. Swords of black bone. Inside the castle, horn blasts answered, echoing across the bailey. Jon stood atop the battlements near the broken tower, Longclaw's pale blade resting against frost-slick stone. Below, barrels of dragonfire, wild green concoctions Davos had bargained from sympathetic alchemists, lined the outer trench, fuses ready. Wildlings crouched with flint and tinder. The first wave came at sunset, cresting the rise like a tide of ragged storm clouds given claws. Arrows hissed, torches arced, barrels shattered in emerald conflagrations. Dead men burned but marched anew, blistered flesh sloughing in sizzling globs. Giant whites smashed aside burning timbers, carving gaps in the trench. Jon led sorties at the breaches, ghost whirling white amid blue-eyed corpses, jaws red with foul gore. Somewhere in the maelstrom, Theon Greyjoy fell defending Bran's sled, axes humming until an ice spear skewered him through. His last cry carried regret, more than pain. Bran's eyes filmed over white, and the weirwood branches above him bent toward the fallen kraken, showering him in crimson leaves like a burial mantle. Dusk deepened into a night without stars. Snow whirled. The dead pressed lanes through fire's gap. Howling in voiceless unity. Robb's line near the Hunter's Gate faltered as a frost giant barreled through, clubbing men like dolls. Then a horn brayed from the north, 3 sharp blasts, brothers returning. Rhaegar charged at the head of 500 heavy horse, cloak blazing where Melisandre's spell flame danced across its seams. A comet of crimson collided with the giant. Rhaegar drove a dragonglass lance through its jaw, up into the skull. Blue fire flickered out in its eyes. The beast toppled, shaking the wall. The cavalry plunged into the breach, cutting undead ranks into carrion spillage. Stannis's voice rang like gongs, rallying pikemen behind him. High above, Bran opened his mind wider. He tasted snow on storms 1,000 leagues distant, heard wolves howling in Skagos forests, felt the pulse of the Wyrnet throbbing like heartbeats of ages. He reached toward the Night King, trying to pierce the armor of frozen will, only to recoil before abyssal chill. Mind burning with frostbite, the Night King felt him. Blue flame eyes swiveled to Bran's hidden perch. From beneath his cloak, he drew a spear of moonwhite crystal and hurled it. The air shrieked. It would have speared Bran but for Jon's sudden leap from the rampart, blade whistling. Longclaw met the spear mid-air. The collision birthed a gout of blinding sparks, and sent Jon skidding across icy stone. The spear ricocheted, embedding in a parapet where masonry steamed. The Night King tilted his head, expression unreadable. He advanced, stepping over carcasses like stepping stones. Around him whites lolled aside, clearing a causeway of horror. Rhaegar saw the path opening. He spurred toward the inner yard, dismounting as his horse went down beneath claws. He sprinted across slick flagstones, drawn the sword gifted him by Robb, dawn reforged, a pale blade traced with rosy veins of dragonglass. Light pulsed inside it, as though each step nearer the Night King fed the weapon's hunger. Jon regained his feet, chest heaving. Together he and Rhaegar converged in a swirl of snow, flanking the icy monarch before the weirwood archway. Melisandre appeared behind them, ruby throbbing. With each pulse the snow hissed away from her boots, forming a circle of steaming slush. The Night King lifted a hand. Wind rose, shrieking, and from torn clouds wheeled ice wraiths, astride great pale shapes. Wyverns of hoarfrost, wings like fractured glass. One dove at Melisandre. She thrust her hands skyward. A column of flame erupted, swallowing the beast whole and hurling its rider into shards of frozen dusk. But each spell drew blood-red sweat from her brow. Jon darted left, battling through whites drawn by silent command. Rhaegar closed straight on the Night King, dawn glowing brighter than forge iron. Steel kissed crystal as they met. One blow, two. Sparks, skating across frozen flagstones. The Night King's spear seemed to absorb light, trailing threads of ice vapor. Rhaegar parried, swept, thrust. Each strike bit, but did not break. The blade moaned under unnatural cold. Jon lunged behind, slashing at the monarch's back. The spear snapped into a hook, catching Longclaw mid-arc and flinging Jon aside. He tumbled, dazed. Rhaegar pressed, pivoted, and slashed low. The Night King leapt back, unnatural grace for such massive armor. In that instant, Bran's voice echoed in Rhaegar's head, not spoken, but felt. Fire and ice. Two notes. One chord. Jon, Rhaegar shouted, breath pluming white. He disengaged, blade flickering. Together. Jon staggered upright. Melisandre stepped between them, hands cupped. From her palms bloomed a mote of red-gold light, swelling until it blazed like a tiny sun. She muttered a final invocation, voice cracking. Lightbringer. With a cry she flung the orb. It struck Dawn's fuller, flowed along the steel like molten sunrise, sheathing the blade in roaring flame that did not melt but sang. Rhaegar pivoted, swung, a perfect half-moon arc, and severed the Night King's spear. Jon parried the follow-up swipe. Longclaw's Valyrian edge bit into black armor, fracturing it like river ice. Another swing. Dawn broke breastplate. Blue fire spurting from the wound hissed on the conflagration. The Night King reeled back. Jon thrust Longclaw through the breach, even as Rhaegar brought Dawn down in a descending cross-stroke. Steel of night and fire hammered together inside frozen heart. Time seemed to halt. A keening wail burst from the Night King. Wind across tombstones, sorrow of eons shattering in a heartbeat. Blue light flared from every seam, then imploded in a vortex of frost. The monarch exploded into crystals, a hailstorm of lustrous shards that melted before they struck earth. Across the field, every wight screamed in silence and collapsed, joints unhinging like marionettes freed of strings. Giants toppled, wolves slumped, horses shattered to slush. A stillness fell so deep men wept loud just to break it. Snow drifted, gentle once more. Rhaegar sank to one knee, sword clanging beside him, flames guttering out. Jon slumped nearby, chest heaving. Melisandre staggered, eyes hollow beyond exhaustion. Her ruby cracked down the center, ember flame extinguishing. She smiled, the expression fragile as first ice. My work. Done. Then she crumbled to ash, cloak folding atop empty air. Rhaegar stared, tears carving warm runnels through soot on his cheeks. May her God keep her, he whispered, and in his voice lay strange gratitude. Dawn broke rose gold on Winterfell, painting ruin in soft light. Smoke curled from gutted towers, mingling with steam off thawing snow. Survivors wandered the yard in a hush. Northern men, Baratheon knights, free folk mothers. Wolves picked through drifts for scraps of undead bone, confused by its sudden stillness. Rhaegar and Jon knelt together in the godswood where Bran slept in the damp moss, skin cool but steady. The heart tree's red leaves glimmered in sunbeams. Robb approached, sling on his arm. It's over, he said. Not a question. For now, Jon answered. Rhaegar looked skyward. No song is ever truly finished. He touched the cracked ruby fragment, John had found among Melisandre's ashes. But some verses echo long enough. Robb studied the prince, eyes flitting to the dragon banner now limp and stained with frostbite gore. What now, then? Rebuild crowns? Rhaegar shook his head. Crown or no, the realm remains wounded. We set bones, then teach it to walk again. The north shall keep its king if it wills. The riverlands may choose their mistress of trident. But each must send a share of crop and coin to feed the burned villages near King's Landing, the orphans in the Reach, the widows everywhere. Now. And the Iron Throne? John asked. Rhaegar's smile was weathered as sea-blown driftwood. Let it rust. We have hearths to tend. Let the realm sit by the same fire at last. Above them, a gust carried red leaves swirling over snow-melt pools that reflected pink dawn streaks. In that mirrored light, 3 figures bent together, dragon, wolf, and stag, casting one shadow. As the wind hushed, the leaves settled like petals on a grave newly honored, and the first spring birds dared to sing under a sky scrubbed clean of night. Smoke still threaded the sharpened air days after dawn's fragile victory, curling from pent-blackened timbers where Winterfell's outer stables had burned to slag. Yet spring pressed its palm against the north, regardless, coaxing white crocus buds through scorched snow, stippling graves with color no mourner had asked for, but all accepted in silence. Rug-clad smallfolk drifted like ghosts between the half-collapsed walls, salvaging blackened horseshoes or arrow-scarred shields for the smiths. No horns sounded, no drums. Death's roar had spent itself, and what lingered now was the disquieting hush of life reasserting dominion. Rhaegar walked the bailey at dawn most mornings, the sword sheathed in plain leather across his back, silver hair bound in a loose tie that the wind perpetually teased free. He made no proclamations from Winterfell's ramparts, no grand speeches promising justice by decree. Instead he nodded to washerwomen wringing blood-stained linen, lent both hands to help Stark masons lever shattered stone from a gatehouse arch, and once knelt beside an orphan girl to coax her eyes from her knees with a worn dragonglass figurine he had carried since Dragonstone. It was those small moments that rippled outward, first as rumors riding south with released Riverlander prisoners, then as songs, for minstrels discovered gold in the quiet nobility of a resurrected prince who mended walls with his own calloused fingers. By the first full moon of true spring Robb, Stark turned his thoughts south. Winterfell would stand without its king. The grain barns brimmed with Karstark tithe, and a rotating host of riverlords garrisoned the castle, while Jon dispersed half the free folk to cultivate abandoned farmsteads under Umbers and Mormonts. Yet the realm beyond Moat, Caelin still tottered on the hinge of fear. Cersei clung to the capital with a boy king whose shrill commands no longer outscreeched the whispers of the Seven's own silent sisters. Euron Greyjoy had sacked the Arbor and sailed east with half the Reach's wine harvest, and Tywin Lannister, wounded more in pride than flesh, had retreated into the rock with enough gold to sow a field of sellswords. Rhaegar convened a gathering beneath the weeping branches of the Godswood, where snow still dappled leaf mounds like scattered bone chips. Robb stood to the prince's right, Stannis to his left, jaw clenched in habitual grind. Bran hovered within the red leaves' hush, eyes dark-rimmed from visions that left him shivering, even in spring's shy warmth. Jon rested one hand on Longclaw's pommel, the fur drape of his cloak brushing dawn-damp grass. Davos Seaworth, Master Milan, Gendry Waters, 2 wildling spearwives, and Tormund Giantsbane filled the ring, an odd council for an odder realm. Rhaegar began without flourish. We have felled the Night's Liege, yet Day's throne still stands in shadow. The realm cannot mend until King's Landing breathes free. Then Stannis' head snapped up. Free from Lannister clutches, you mean? Free from any single fist, the prince replied. The Iron Throne spawns war as surely as summer spawns flies. Melt it. Robb's brow pinched. And replace it with what? The Riverlands cry for grain. The Vale still bars its bloody gate. Dorne smolders over Elias' memory. A realm of 1,000 petty crowns breeds the same butcher's bill. And yet a single crown has torn us apart twice in one generation. Jon said softly, "Perhaps steel should not decide alone." Bran's voice drifted like leaf rustle. A new wheel, not a new spoke. The council emptied their lungs in varying degrees of bemusement. Rhaegar's gaze settled on Bran. "Speak plainly, little brother." The boy's thin mouth twitched. When the first men bargained with the children, they swore peace beneath the weirwood canopy. They knelt not to kings but to the promises carved by their own hands. Break a promise, bleed. Honor it, flourish. We need a promise all realms can carve. Stannis grunted. Fine words for a lad with sap for blood. How carve oaths between men who share no gods? Them? By sharing voice, said Davos. His stump twitched beneath its leather cap, a ghost itch each time politics rose. Let every region send a chosen speaker to a table where swords rest sheathed. A council to rule instead of one, murmured Gendry, brow furrowed as though forging numbers rather than iron. Would folk heed such talk once the fear fades? They will heed fields fed and roads patrolled, Robb answered. He traced a boot toe through moss. They will heed tax levies fairer than Lannister coin squeezes. They will heed peace if given cause to trust it. No. Trust. There lay the splinter. Tywin's coffers, Cersei's venom, Euron's sails, and the gaping power of old Valyrian dragons, not yet flown across the world's curve. All could splinter fragile accords. But war had scoured them near hollow. There lingered a weariness deeper than vengeance. Under that exhaustion seedbed, new order might root. So they planned. 100 ravens took flight within a fortnight, north and south, east to Old Town and Sunspear, west to the Golden Tooth. Each bird bore parchment inked in a neat hand. Jon's, for his script bridged north and south better than Septon or Maester, a proposal for a great council at Harrenhal upon the summer solstice. No crown required for attendance, only willingness to speak and abide by majority's voice. Meanwhile, Rhaegar's host would march on the capital, not to siege but to escort Queen Cersei to that council whether she willed or not. We will tear down no gates this time, he assured his captains, but we will not leave them standing in defiance either. Stannis took that as license to sharpen rams. Davos took it as order to send envoys ahead offering safe exit to innocents. Robb took it as chance to ride with Grey Wind's memory beside him and show southern peasants that northern banners could offer bread as much as blades. The march south carried echoes of trauma, yet new sights too. Charred fields where sprouts unfurled despite ghost ash. Villagers emerging to cheer as Rhaegar ordered cisterns filled and wells purified. Freeborn wildlings trading furs for Sarsfield barley loaves in makeshift markets. A singer in Pink Maiden's Square unveiled a ballad, titled The Prince Who Dug Graves. Weeping even as he strummed, Rhaegar stayed to hear every verse and left a purse for the man's sick mother. At Maidenpool, they found a grim surprise. A ragged column of sellswords under black banners quartered in Lord Mooton's orchard. The Golden Company, 500 of the 10,000 Cersei had hired across the narrow sea, stood under the command of a gaunt lieutenant named Sir Miles Toynde. Their famed elephants had perished in a storm, and most of their strength was still at sea or garrisoned in King's Landing, but the lieutenant barred the road regardless. Toyn requested parley in the half-flooded market square. He wore the company's coin tree sigil on a cloak, frayed to threads. Rain dribbled through broken eaves as Rhaegar approached, flanked by Jon and Stannis. Toyn's bow dripped disdain. Queen Cersei bids you halt. She recognizes no sovereignty in a white slayer nor a wolf cub. No sovereignty, no, Rhaegar agreed. Only a road. He gestured to the muddy lane weaving behind Toyn's ranks. We shall pass, or you shall lie in it. Toyn's lip curled. Gold pays our swords. Jon drew Longclaw a handspan. Dead men spend nothing. Toyn eyed the pale Valyrian edge, then the ranks of stark spears bristling beyond. He noted the smudged red comet on Rhaegar's scabbard, and perhaps he weighed the odds of dying for a queen, rumored to flay servants when wine ran sour. He parceled pride into a thin smile. Then pass, but know the company keeps receipts. Send them to Harrenhal, Davos called from the flank, with your vote. They passed without blood, though half of Toyn's men defected within the next 2 nights, leaving their cloaks draped over hedgerows like shed skin. In King's Landing, Cersei drank arbor red until her teeth stained purple. The small council chambers stank of rotting rushes. The Red Keep cellars brimmed with casks of spoiled grain. Larvae wriggled through flour meant for siege stocks. Qyburn knew hand by default, urged withdrawal behind Maegor's walls. But Qyburn also whispered that wildfire caches still ring the city's underbelly, and that a single spark might yet erase invaders and subjects alike. Cersei's laugh at that suggestion did not warm the chill behind Qyburn's eyes. Tyrion arrived under white flag 2 days before the host's vanguard. He requested audience only with his brother, but Jaime had vanished beyond the city weeks ago, tracking rumors of Brienne's survival near Harrenhal. So Tyrion stood alone before the Iron Throne. A scorched contortion of blades whose shadows climbed the walls like spidering cracks. Cersei lounged upon it, crown askew, goblet in hand. "Sister," he began, but she cut him with a glare. "M.P." He cleared his throat. "I come not to beg but to bargain. A council is called. Harrenhal. Summer solstice. Rhaegar will take you there alive if you yield. Then thou." She sipped, allowing bright rivulets to streak her chin. "He'll take a head. It need not be attached. Perhaps. Yet think, if the realm votes, Joffrey might still sit some new seat, Prince of the Crownlands perhaps, even if the throne itself dies." Joffrey flung a melon rind at his uncle from atop the dais. "I'll have the dwarf's tongue," he squealed. But the rind missed, landing with a wet splut. Cersei's knuckles whitened around her cup. "Leave, or I'll hang you beside Rosby's child hostages." Tyrion exhaled through his nose, half derision, half grief. He turned without another word, pausing only to murmur to Qyburn, "Wildfire won't choose friend from foe, nor will dragons." He left the maester to weigh which flame threatened worse. That night, Varys unlocked a secret door and guided Tyrion down pitch-strewn tunnels to the Mudgate. As they parted, the eunuch pressed a parchment into Tyrion's palm. "For your prince. Proof that some creatures in this pit still value breath over loyalty." Danna. On the parchment coiled a list of every wildfire cache under King's Landing, with sketch maps scratched by an alchemist's nervous hand. Tyrion rode under starlight, mind racing. Rhaegar encamped on the south bank of the Blackwater Rush, drums silent, banners furled. Ziga lines were never drawn. Instead, humanitarian tents spread like a second city. Cauldrons of barley stew, herbalists from the sisters applying poultices, Dornish water carriers handing flasks to gaunt flea-bottom refugees, who trickled across an undefended bridge left open by the prince's decree. "No soldier crosses armed," he had ordered. "Only healers and bakers." Cersei took it as insult and weakness in equal parts. But hunger gnawed fortress morale more effectively than any ram. By the 10th dawn, even half the gold cloaks threw open postern gates, begging salted pork. Rhaegar granted amnesty to every guard who surrendered his badge at the field's central hearth. By sunset, smokestacks of melting sigils piled shoulder high, little golden cloaks curling in the fire like autumn leaves. Still, the Red Keep held. Whatever wildfire caches the alchemists had not already hidden, they now lugged toward the dungeons. Tyrion slipped into camp with Varys 2 nights before full surrender, pressing the parchments into Davos' hands. A frantic war council convened within a merchant's pavilion. Robb, Stannis, Jon, Rhaegar, and Maester Malon bent over ink-smudged diagrams while dragon-glass lanterns hissed. Davos' finger jabbed locations: the Sept of Baelor, Guildhall vaults, granaries by the Gate of the Gods. If she lights even 2, half the city's slums vanish with 8,000 innocents. And she will, to spite us. Robb slammed a fist. "Break water channels, flood the sewers." "A river of wildfire floats," Tyrion murmured. "Burns atop water." Stannis' glare could have scored plate. "No path but steel. We storm." "And now?" Rhaegar shook his head. "No. A dragon fights fire with fire." He unrolled a second parchment, a roster of every obsidian arrowhead, every dragon-glass blade still stockpiled after the long night. "We deliver fire that obeys." Jon understood first. "Your nephew's dragons." The camp quieted. Few had spoken of Daenerys Targaryen since ravens last whispered her across the narrow sea. Hard-won victories in Slaver's Bay, 2 dragons fully grown, the black Drogon towering thrice the size of Aegon, the conqueror's Balerion by some accounts. Months earlier, a Carthene trader, arriving at White Harbor, had sworn dragons circled the ghost city Valyria, filling the sky with molten dawn. Rumor, they believed. Yet Rhaegar had felt a tug in his marrow each time the name Daenerys rode the wind. Now he said, "She sailed from Meereen at frost's break. I have felt her approach as one feels a storm before the sail roars. Her fleet may reach these shores within days." Stannis scoffed. "You place realm's hope on sea winds." Tyrion cleared his throat. "If the storm arrives, I should like to survive its landfall. She will not burn a city her brother shelters. Nendoansha." "Unless she doubts the brother's word," Davos answered grimly. Rhaegar's gaze flicked to Jon. "Then you and I must convince her." The narrow sea birthed armadas and graves indiscriminately. On the 4th dawn of Rhaegar's standoff, black sails shredded morning fog beyond the gullet. 3-masted war barges bearing a silver dragon crowned with 3 moons. The onlookers on the walls, gold cloaks, sellswords, bakers' boys, exhaled in one shuddering breath. Whispers ripped through the capital before cannon smoke could dissipate. The fleet anchored beyond Scorpion bolt range. No dragon soared overhead. Yet at high noon, a single boat rowed across the shallows, oars thumping like measured heartbeats. 2 figures disembarked at the ash-choked quay. A woman in silver-scaled armor, violet eyes afire, and beside her the towering eunuch Grey Worm, spearbutt tapping stone. Daenerys Targaryen did not pause to admire the creaking city. She marched straight for the Lion Gate where Rhaegar waited unarmored. The siblings halted an arm's length apart. Silence pressed like the moment before thunder. Daenerys studied the face time had resurrected. Older lines, silver hair tipped by frost, eyes still reflective as lilac pools. Tears brimmed but did not fall. She set her palm against his cheek. "I saw you die," she whispered. "I have died many times," he murmured, voice breaking. "Each time I prayed the next song would be yours." She fell into his embrace with a sob. The city walls erupted in gasps, some of awe, others of disbelief. On a distant parapet, Cersei's cup shattered against the stone. After tears came strategy. In a pavilion just beyond range of Scorpion bolt views, Daenerys listened as Tyrion outlined the wildfire threat. Grey Worm's jaw flexed at each site named. Melisandre scribbled Astapori shorthand for unsullied captains. Daenerys' gaze never left her brother. "No city will burn," she said. "But if the queen lights so much as a candle near those vaults, Drogon will topple the Red Keep to rubble." That night, Rhaegar and Daenerys ascended a low hill overlooking the Blackwater. A hush swallowed even river cicadas as Drogon emerged from clouds like a living fragment of night. His wingspan cloaked half the horizon, embers dancing off obsidian scales. Rhaegal and Viserion circled behind. Slightly smaller but no less fearsome. Campfires guttered in awe. Some men sank to their knees, others fled behind wagons. Rhaegar stood still until the black beast alighted, earthquake rippling beneath his talons. Daenerys stepped forward, fingertips on Drogon's jaw, murmuring in Valyrian tongue. Then she turned to Rhaegar. "Blood binds dragons. Love guides them. Lay your palm beside mine." He did. The beast's molten eye narrowed. A plume of smoke curled from nostrils broad as smithy chimneys. Rhaegar felt heat tingle through bones, yet no flame roared. Instead, Drogon lowered his massive head, and for the second time that year Rhaegar knew the hush of miracles. Cersei's resolve cracked the next dawn when Drogon crossed the keep's rooftop at torch's height, each wing-beat gust flinging guards from ramparts. He loosed no fire, his shadows alone sufficed. Under that monstrous eclipse, bells tolled from old Baelor's shattered Sept Tower. Alarms warped into surrender knells. Qyburn himself unlocked the mud gate, white flag trembling in his grip. Rhaegar led the first contingent over the drawbridge. Jon and Grey Worm secured dungeons, Davos the granaries, Robb the armorers. No swords drawn, no stocks pillaged, by Rhaegar's strict command. He walked the torch-lit corridors of Maegor's Holdfast alone until he reached the queen's apartments. There, Cersei waited in a gown of morning black, crown glinting above eyes rimmed raw. Joffrey lurked behind, crossbow shaking. "Hear the terms, your grace," Rhaegar said softly. "You and your children ride to Harrenhal as guests. You will speak before the council. If they name you Lady of the Crownlands, you shall rule from Dragonstone's restored keep. If they banish you, the Dornish shore awaits with escort. No dungeon for your blood." Her lips peeled. "You think mercy is strength? I know it is." She moved quicker than rage, Winnock knife clutched behind her sleeve, lunging. Rhaegar caught her wrist. The blade clattered. Joffrey squealed and aimed, but Joan's gloved hand seized the weapon's crank. The boy crumpled, howling. Grey Worm stepped between. Cersei struggled, tears finally spilling. Perhaps from fury, perhaps from something deeper. Rhaegar held her gently until the storm passed. Thus ended the siege of King's Landing, without a single catapult stone hurled, without wildfire spark. Word galloped across the kingdoms that dragons had conquered the capital by shadow and song. For many, it felt as though a chapter had closed. For others, the blank space that followed threatened more dread than pages full of war. Summer solstice dawned hot as forge smoke over the blasted towers of Harrenhal. Once mighty black stones sagged like candle wax, yet the gods had a cruel humor. The castle's vast yard still offered room enough for 2,000 lords, ladies, maesters, and low-born envoys to gather in makeshift pavilions. Banners of every quarter snapped, Arryn falcons, Martell spears, Greyjoy krakens, Tully trout, Tyrell roses, even the kraken seahorse of Velaryon now flown for allied cause. At mid-morning, a makeshift dais of weirwood planks and hammered iron rose before the Widow's Tower's gouged gate. Upon it sat no throne, only 6 benches semicircling an empty center. One by one speakers took the center, Princess Arianne Martell proclaiming Dorne's hunger for autonomy and safe trade, Lord Paxter Redwine begging fleet relief from Euron's reavers, Lady Mage Mormont bellowing for widows' pensions from any realm purse that replaced king's taxes. Tyrion read a charter for a conclave of coin to prevent lords defaulting on harvest tithes. Even Tormund Giantsbane spoke, after gorging on spiced snake from Qarth merchants, demanding land rights for free folk south of the Wall. When Tywin Lannister's standard finally rolled through the broken gate on the 3rd day, silence cracked the yard. The old lion looked carved from his own sigil, gold drained to pale stone. Behind him rode fewer than 200 knights, the pride of the rock pared to ribs. He dismounted stiffly and strode to the dais where Rhaegar already stood. Daenerys at one flank, Robb at the other. Jon, Bran, and Stannis waited behind like silent pillars. Tywin faced the council. "I come not to yield but to bargain." He unfurled a scroll. "My grandson Tommen, son of Jaime Lannister and Lady Brienne of Tarth, shall inherit the rock. My daughter Cersei will retire to the Silent Sisters. Joffrey forfeits all claim upon crown or title. May the 7 judge him." He paused. "In return, House Lannister demands voice equal to any in your new order. 1 seat upon whatever council rules the realm." Gasps rippled. Jaime father to Tommen? Yet few contested. Rumors long accused the twins. Tywin's public confession severed the illusion with surgical precision, sparing the realm further war for a bastard's crown. Some called it capitulation. Others, the lion's final gambit to ensure legacy. Rhaegar accepted with single nod. The council will have 7 seats, each serving 10-year terms before new elections by regional assemblies, he announced. 1 each for the North, Crownlands, Riverlands, Stormlands, Reach, Dorne, and the Westerlands. The Isles may petition for inclusion when reaving ceases for 2 harvests. His gaze skewered Asha Greyjoy, who shrugged as though 2 harvests were a blink. Stannis' jaw hardened. He had hoped for a narrower body. Yet he bowed to consensus when Davos convinced him that rule by many still required strong law, Law Stannis might codify as Lord Legislator rather than King. Daenerys presented the second motion, dismantling of the Iron Throne. At dusk, workers in char-resistant leathers ferried blacksmith hammers through the god's eye's steam. Before a crowd of thousands, they cracked at fused blades until shards sprayed like sparks. Each noble family retrieved fragments once forged from their ancestors' surrendered swords 2 centuries earlier. Some kissed the steel. Others tossed it into lake water as though cleansing bloodlines of war. The final blow fell to Rhaegar. He raised Dawn overhead, not as conqueror but caretaker, and drove it hard through the throne's warped seat, splitting the iron like overripened fruit. The clang echoed under Harrenhal's ruinous vault, a note half triumph, half requiem. Flames from torches licked the fractured blades. Embers hissed skyward, tiny funerals for old power. Bran later told them the wind carried those sparks across the god's eye and into weirwood groves, where they nestled harmlessly among roots. Even iron yearns to be reborn, he mused. Give it soil enough. In the moons that followed, the realm discovered how fragile peace could feel. Refugees begged seed grain. Docks required dredging. Free companies still prowled the narrow sea. Yet something in the collective spine of Westeros straightened. Markets reopened. Smithies rang. Septons debated whether a council of regions aligned with the 7-pointed star's spirit more than any single king. Maesters scribed new compendia on dragon physiology. Rhaegar nested near the god's eye, Viserion overflew Dorne, and Drogon patrolled the skies like a living treaty, his shadow reminding lords the price of returning to old games. Jon took stewardship of a reformed Night's Watch. Smaller, mixed with wildlings, financed by realm tithe. He traveled often between the Wall and Winterfell, where he served Robb as hand, though rumor persisted that Robb would step down in 3 winters and name Jon king of the North with daughter future yet unborn by Valyrian bride. Robb dismissed gossip by kissing his wife Jaime Westerling under White Harbor's maple arch. The realm swooned. Stannis accepted appointment as Justicar of the realm, chief arbiter for the council's new courts. Lord or small folk, each stood equal before his granite glare and the codex he penned with Maester Malin. Whispered jokes said the focus of forms kept him warmer than Dragonstone ever had. Tyrion served as Master of Coin for 1 term before retiring to Seaguard, where he wrote memoirs charitably titled It Pays to Listen, dedicating them to a brother who laughed, a father who didn't, and a sister who never could. Some copies survived his lifetime. Daenerys sailed east again, not in exile but on mission. She left Rhaegal with her brother and carried 50 Westerosi volunteers to Meereen to teach freedmen agricultural craft, gleaned from northern orchards. She vowed to return each harvest to vote on council motions and to keep her dragons as living bridges, rather than weapons. She and Rhaegar parted on a dawn beach where sea foam hissed over glassy eggs half buried in silt, rumor of more dragons, myth for another song. As for Rhaegar Targaryen, he never took a crown. Instead, he lived months at a time in each region, overseeing dike repairs along the Mander, tending sick orphans outside Lannisport, mediating clan disputes in the Vale. When asked his title, he answered, Prince of Ashes and Gardener of Tomorrow. Bards favored the grave-digging dragon. Children simply called him Silver Uncle, for his pockets seemed always to produce an old Braavosi coin or toy carved from dragonglass. On the first anniversary of Winterfell's siege, snowflakes drifted again through the godswood. Rhaegar sat cross-legged before the heart tree, harp resting on his knees. Jon knelt opposite, Bran perched on a low root, eyes half filmy as though seeing layers of the same world. Around them torches guttered faintly, but the clearing's hush was deep. Play, Bran whispered. Rhaegar plucked a low chord. Soft, uncertain. Jon added voice, baritone cracked by weather and memory. Words blossomed, not of war or prophecy, but of tilled earth, hearth-fire laughter, children chasing sun motes through halls rebuilt of hopestone and honest timber. Bran's voice joined higher, weaving threads like mist through pine. Leaves rustled overhead, and for an instant, all three felt the realm listening. A hush in every field and market, a hush in the wind curling round the wall's repaired stones. When the last note faded, Rhaegar breathed deep and smiled. Perhaps the song ends here. No, Jon said. Here it begins. Bran nodded, eyes reflecting snow-caught starlight. Every dawn is a beginning. So they sat beneath a tree, older than thrones, older than sin, and let the hush linger. Winter might come again. Storms always did. But somewhere in the hush crocus buds pushed green tips through thawing loam. Dragons wheeled above cloud seas without flame, and 1,000 hands, calloused, noble, small and rough, lifted stones and seeds instead of swords. And the realm, for once, listened more than it shouted. The hush became habit, then hymn, then heritage, until children's children grew up knowing thrones only from tales. And when they asked what ended the wars, the elders answered with a story of a prince who dug graves, a wolf who opened gates, a priestess who burned out like a falling star, and the song they sang beneath white leaves that promised beginnings without end. Mist breathed off the god's eye at dawn, coiling over still water like slow unspooling ribbon. Across the glass-dark expanse, ravens swept low to snatch insects that danced where sunlight had yet to intrude, and the desiccated husk of Harrenhal, monument to every excess of dragonfire, sat crowned in new scaffolds and tar-swathed rigging. Gray banners marked with the 7-pointed star fluttered alongside the trout of Tully, the direwolf of Stark, the spear son of Martell, and the coin tree of the newly pardoned Golden Company carpenters, who bolted replacement beams into the oldest surviving tower. Rhaegar drew a deep breath of wet rushes, one boot balanced on the half-rebuilt quay. The realm's carpenters insisted the pier would bear his weight, yet he felt the pulse of cracked pilings beneath his soles, like the startled thrum of an overworked heart. Jon Snow joined him, shrugging a fur-rimmed cloak off his shoulders in the soft warmth. "They'll finish the conference hall on schedule," Jon said, voice rough with early morning frost and too little sleep. "Stormlords and Reach envoys arrive in a fortnight. Then come the grain treaties, the Whispers smuggler amnesty, the Coin Guild audits." He let the sentences drift, as though they might drift off the lake and vanish. Rhaegar watched a cormorant dip beneath still water and burst upward with a flash of silver trout gripped in its beak. "Civilization sounds louder than war in the quiet hours," he murmured. Paper crackles where steel once clanged. Jon tilted his head, half-smile tugging his mouth. "You prefer clanging?" "I prefer purpose. These halls of parchment give many men direction, yet parchment tears." He nodded toward scaffolding. "Stone stands longer." Jon studied splinter-scored planks. "Until dragonfire." A soft laugh touched Rhaegar's lips. "Even dragonfire cools. The world builds after every flame." He turned from the water. "We ride for Maidenpool at noon. Arianne Martell reports sellsword bands prowling the Rose Road. Guard her supply wagons. Keep the peace." Jon nodded and strode for the stables. Rhaegar lingered. Sun-peeled mist from the god's eye, revealing ripples in mirrored light where the Fisher King's daughters once drowned themselves, so legend whispered. Across that water, Bran Stark had dreamt of the heart of winter the night before Rhaegar felled the Night King. He closed his eyes, inhaled. For a heartbeat he thought he tasted distant snow, salted by possibility, or perhaps the copper tang of prophecy yet unmet. He shook the thought away. Bran Stark refused to sit idle among scaffolds. He spent mornings in Raven's Tower, fingers gliding over timber grain as he mapped each joist, each rung instructing masons to slide heart-tree struts, lighter than granite but stronger against fire, through load-bearing walls. At dusk he foraged, owl, sparrow, sometimes silent trout knifing through the god's eye's cool blackness, seeking any rumor of old magics fermenting in the forgotten cracks of the realm. On the 15th night of his vigil, a dream claimed him. He stood in a forest of glass, trees glittering like prism-shattered moonlight, branches bowing beneath clusters of crystal fruit. A song drifted, no melody he had heard, but one that vibrated his bones. In a clearing knelt a woman with hair pale as dawn, robed in scales of living pearl. She pressed her palm to the earth, and snow blossomed beneath her fingers. Where the snow touched the glass trunks, they spider-webbed with fractures and collapsed. Bran reached to stop her. She lifted her gaze. Her eyes blazed gold, pupils slit like a cat. "Blood for soil," she whispered. Winter was only dreaming. Now the dreamer wakes. He jolted, breath rasping. Sweat chilled across his back. He refused to call for maesters. Prophecy felt too fragile for scholarly light. Instead, he wheeled to his desk, quill scratching. Dream? Golden-eyed woman, forest of glass, snow-blooming ruin. Remember the first doom. By time Rhaegar and Jon reached Maidenpool, the air tasted of trampled heather and blade oil. 200 sellswards camped in the town's orchard. Pear blossoms twitched beneath makeshift laundry lines hung with stolen tabards. Their captain, Allo Haraway, a descendant of King Maegor's executed hand if rumor spoke truth, wore a brocade doublet dyed funereal green, thin mustache lacquered to points like quills. "These lands lack strong lordship," Haraway said, greeting the prince beside the splintered well. "The Mootons marched west to your council. Who protects the populace if not we?" His fingers danced upon the pommel of a Dornish stiletto. "We extract a fair levy. 1 copper per shepherd, 2 for merchants. Bargain enough." Jon's jaw set caught. "You threaten isolated farms and call it fair?" Haraway's mustache quivered. "Protection fees. Monsters still prowl. Ask the children of the Eyrie farm. Giant shadowcats carved up their nanny 3 nights past." He flashed teeth. "We slew both beasts for them." "Cats seldom roam this far south," Jon countered. But Rhaegar lifted a calming hand. He scanned the Sellsword's ranks, war-scarred veterans, aye, but also a dozen smallfolk boys too fresh to have fought anywhere north of the neck. Desperate men purchased by fear, not coin alone. Rhaegar removed dawn from its sheath and planted the blade tip in soil. The pale steel glimmered beneath overcast sky. "Here is your levy," he said. "Sword service for those who would take up lawful cause. Any man willing to serve the council shall line beside Lord Mooton's levies at once, swearing to end predation. Those who refuse must be gone by sunset." "Then shall." Haraway barked a laugh, until his lieutenants began drifting to Rhaegar's side. One by one they unslung spears. Hunger etched deep lines in their cheeks. The promise of lawful pay glinted brighter than pillaged coppers. Within an hour, half the sellsword host had joined the prince. The remainder, Haraway among them, mounted disgruntled destriers and clattered toward the Salt Coast Road. Jon watched silently. "We gain swords but must feed bellies." "And hearts," Rhaegar replied. "Starving men can be taught justice more readily than sated tyrants." Months passed. Crops sprouted green along the Mander's meander. Gulls nested upon Dragonstone's smoke-shorn slopes. Carp slid silver beneath the God's Eye where shipwrights tested prototype, water wheels designed by Gendry Waters, and a Lysine scholar, once indentured in Meereen. Across bridge and fjord couriers carried council decrees, abolition of debt bondage in the Crownlands, grain subsidies for war-widowed mothers, an edict establishing new words moots, gatherings where small folk could petition itinerant judges without traveling leagues to hold fast keeps. Yet beneath the veneer of renewal, a quiet unease threaded taverns. Sailors spoke of pillars of smoke at sea, of waters churned to tar-black froth beyond the stepstones. Fishermen hauled nets of eyeless cod, fins ragged with rot that steamed and bled green ichor. A Dornish spice caravan reached Highgarden missing half its camels, each carcass found along the gold road crystallized to brittle husks, as though drained of salt. Maesters tutted about salt imbalance, yet Bran Stark's dreams grew harsher. In the Raven's Tower, Bran traced a finger across a map newly inked by young Maester Emilia. He circled 9 red Enxas, each the site of a reported salt-sick death. The pattern traced a southeast arc, points equidistant, as if something moved methodically inland from the broken arm of Dorne. "Famine or plague tends wild," Emilia observed, voice trembling behind scholarly reserve. "This marks geometry. Unnatural." Bran's eyes clouded. "Nature obeys deeper reasons than men expect. Sometimes deeper still than men can survive." Meanwhile, Daenerys Targaryen returned sooner than pledged. Rhaegar met her fleet at Duskendale, where fog parted to reveal sails embroidered with a new sigil, dragon wings cradling a broken chain. She disembarked with Grey Worm, Melisandre, and a captain of ex-slavers named Resnack the Just. Their holds brimmed with sacks of cured peppers, casks of Taroshi tillfish, and scrolls describing irrigation trenches that sang water from sand, as Myriene's engineers claimed. But her eyes held shadow. In the lantern room above Sweetport Sound she spoke to Rhaegar alone. Karth fears ghosts rising beneath their canals, she said, turning a small porcelain mask in her fingers. A trading sloop out of Yeti reported columns of living glass stalking the Jade Steppes. Her gaze searched his with old, childlike dread. The plague of ghosts we defeated may have unshackled more than we knew. Rhaegar listened, knuckles whitening on stone balustrade. Glass trees, he murmured. Bran's dream. He told her the vision. Daenerys shivered. Dragonflame will not melt crystal as it melts ice, she whispered. I tested. A shard I found in the dunes of Valyria grew hotter than the breath of Drogon, yet never softened. It hummed. Rhaegar looked to the horizon. Storm clouds bruising the sky beyond the narrow sea. Does it march this way? Glass seldom marches, she said, forcing a smile. But fear does. At summer's height, the Great Council reconvened in Harrenhal's newborn Hall of Echoes. Candled chandeliers swung beneath vaulting arches of reclaimed weirwood. The floor mosaic displayed 7 interlocking sigils in shades of river clay. Yet the first petition did not come from a lord. It came from a woman draped in seaweed shawl. Skin gray pale, eyes roomy as tide pools. She claimed to speak for the people of drowned earth, fisherfolk ravaged by salt sickness along Blackwater Bay. Her account chilled the hall. Starfish melting into white paste, eels twisting into glassy statues, children wasting though they drank river water each morning. Maester Malon proposed river inspections. Stannis countered with strict harbor quarantines. Tyrion suggested sponsoring alchemists to neutralize toxins. But Bran rose, cane trembling under his frail weight. The river is but a page in a wider book, he said, voice thin yet resonant. The disease does not flow, it walks. He gestured east upon the mosaic. Where the doom cracked Valyria, there lies a wound still bleeding into the world. Something stirs within that wound. Tywin Lannister snorted across the dais. More sorcery. Rhaegar answered, surprising many. Yet sorcery near drowned us beneath winter. We ignore new omens at our peril. Silence followed, until Daenerys addressed the council. I will sail to the doom, she declared. My blood bound to dragons once chained within those ruins. Drogon will fly above the Shadowlands themselves if need be. Rhaegar's protest died on his lips. He saw the absolution in her eyes, a purpose she could not surrender. I sail with you, Jon said suddenly, stepping from the Northerner's bench. Robb half rose in protest, but Jon's gaze never wavered from Daenerys. I have no dragon, but I know how to fight what men have not named. Daenerys inclined her head. We leave with the next tide. Preparations consumed 3 weeks. Gendry forged spearheads of interlaid dragonglass and Valyrian steel, harder than either alone, while Carl the Maid welded liner plates for Grey Worm's leather breastplate. Asha Greyjoy contributed slim longships equipped to skim the smoking sea's volcanic shoals. Tyrion gifted a cache of Myrish lens pipes, so watchers might spy dangers leagues away. Rhaegar watched ships load by torchlight, and felt an old fear tangling with older faith. To Bran he confided at dawn, if I let her sail alone, the realm may survive, but my heart will not. Bran smiled sadly. The realm lies inside that heart. Sail, brother. So Rhaegar donned plain mail, and boarded the black-hulled Wyvern's grace beside Jon, Daenerys, Grey Worm, Melisandre, Tormund Giantsbane, and a company of knights, watch volunteers hungering for anything but wallstone. 3 dragons soared overhead, wing beats reverberating through the planks. Behind them, the horizon rolled west, summer haze brightening the outline of a world too fleeting for easy peace. Weeks blurred into sea spray and constant vigilance. At night, Drogon's silhouette glowed red from the fiery spume bursting through cracks in the smoking sea, his roar scattering flocks of sulfur gulls. The fleet threaded labyrinths of obsidian shards rising like fangs from water, steam hissing where ocean met magma. Any fearsome legend of the doom they had ever heard proved halved beside the ruins' living menace. One twilight they moored near an island shaped like a broken crown. Sailors dubbed it Cinderhelm. Daenerys led a scouting party ashore, boots crunching black glass pebbles that glittered beneath starlight. Jon trailed with spear poised, senses prickling. The air tasted metallic, sharp as blood coin. Among charred pillars, they found what appeared to be men, figures fused into molten archways, arms uplifted in supplication, faces erased by heat so intense the stone itself sagged like candle wax. In a central plaza half buried beneath ash lay a lump of translucent crystal thrice the height of a man. It pulsed faintly, rhythm echoing heartbeats. Rhaegar touched it. Cold pierced his marrow. He yanked his hand away. Frost rimed his fingertips despite oppressive heat. Daenerys approached, palms raised, and began to sing. And an old Valyrian lullaby Viserys had once muttered on nights he wept. The crystal quivered, pulse quickening. Hair on every scout's nape bristled. Jon gripped her arm. Dany, no. Too late. The crystal cracked. From within seeped pale mist that writhed into ghost-limbed shapes. One brushed Rhaegar's cheek. He flinched as though slapped by winter itself. Where the mist touched steel, frost blossomed. Grey Worm ordered torches forward. Fire licked mist. The shapes recoiled with screeching hiss like ice crushed underfoot. Drogon roared overhead, but the cavernous holds of the isle echoed louder. An answering chorus of crystalline moans. Fissures splintered the plaza floor. Rhaegar snapped commands. Retreat. They scrambled for the shallop, mist chasing like grasping wraiths. Jon flung a dragonglass spear. It shattered one phantom, which exploded into ice dust that burned where it settled. Drogon's fire followed, carving a corridor of steam. Daenerys stumbled. Rhaegar hauled her, cloak smoking. They reached water, pushed off. As oars bit brine, the island behind them convulsed. Pillars toppled into glowing fissures. From the crater mouth rose a column of pale radiance. No fire, no ice, but something between, gleaming with refracted colorless light. It reached skyward until clouds ignited into shimmering aurora despite daylight's last blush. Light of the unseen, Melisandre whispered, translating an old Kiskari phrase. Terror glazed her dark eyes. Back aboard Wyvern's Grace, Daenerys wrapped in blankets, teeth chattering. I felt them, she rasped. Cold songs. Sorrow older than dragons. They dream inside those crystals, waiting for warmth to touch them. I warmed them. Tormund spat. Should Bev left him snoring. Jon squeezed her hand. Now we know they wake. We also know fire drives them back. We can warn the realm. But Rhaegar stared at the island, now slipping beneath waves as if swallowed by unseen leviathan, and felt the gut-punch certainty that warning might not suffice. The fleet hastened home. Yet currents fought their oars, and winds died. Days stretched, each horizon mirage identical. Food spoiled, water rationed. At night singing crystals far below their keels chimed faintly, luring sailors to lean too far over rails, until brothers hauled them back from the gloom. Drogon wheeled restless circles, roaring at watery nothing. One dawn he dove upon shimmering planktonic cloud, scorching it to steam. As it dissipated, shapes like glass serpents writhed back into depths, leaving trails of frozen foam. Finally a squall caught their masts, driving them screaming toward Westeros. White harbor lights shimmered in early winter dusk when hulls scraped dock pilings. Snowflakes drifted, First of the season though harvest lingered. Bran watched from crenellations, crow perched upon his shoulder, eyes haunted before the first word reached him. When Daenerys disembarked, Bran's whisper reached her ears on the wind. The dreamer wakes. In Harrenhal's Hall of Echoes, the great bell tolled thrice. Signal of realm emergency. Lords arrived under sleet that stung like sand, muttering about harvests, halted by sudden chill. Gulls lay dead on the Trident's banks, feathers glazed in rime under midsummer sun. The council convened, faces ashen. Jon spoke first, recounting the island, the crack, the mist. Gendry displayed frost etchings on the spear that hit the phantom, tiny runic lattice no maester could translate. Daenerys laid the porcelain Carthene mask upon the table, its once flawless glaze now spiderwebbed with identical runes. Bran wheeled forward. These are not undead, nor fiery demons. They are forgotten, echoes of a civilization long preceding even the children. They wove glass as we weave cloth, weaving it into vessels to cross starless void above our skies. When the doom tore Valyria, their vaults exposed, they slept, but not dead. Now the world warms enough to stir them. Bend a soul. Tywin sneered. Children's tales. Yet his hand trembled upon lion-headed Cain. Stannis stood. How fight glass that drinks fire and shatters ice? Daenerys answered, voice steady. With both. Fire startles them, ice slows, but the alloy of dragon glass and Valyrian steel shattered their form. We forge more. Gendry squared shoulders. I can craft spear points, but not swords, not without lost spells. Rhaegar looked to the dais where Samwell Tarly clutched a stack of parchment, thick as a siege wall. Old Town's crystal archives. Sam stammered. Recently found beneath the starry scepter. They detail forging magics, light and dark folded together. A collective breath stirred banners overhead. Rhaegar tapped the table. We will gather every blacksmith who swung a hammer for war. We reforge not to conquer but to preserve. Bran added, and I must return to the heart tree beneath Winterfell. The roots there twine deepest, mayhaps far enough to taste the Forgotten's memories. Da. Jon reached to steady his brother's shoulder. You won't go alone. Thus began the second forging. Kilns roared in Wintertown, Lannisport, Old Town's smoky dock quarter. Dragonglass shards sailed from Dragonstone quarries, escorted by Greyjoy longships, newly sworn to cease reaving. Qyburn, grudgingly pardoned for his knowledge of secret alchemies, supervised infusion of wild silver flux to bind glass to steel. Even Tywin's gold proved necessary, financing miners who risked collapse in the smoking sea to unearth hidden seams of raw dragonglass. Rhaegar traveled forge to forge, lending hand and voice. He mastered the bellows. Sweat wicking silver hair to his neck, as Gendry hammered heated billets thinner than parchment before folding them again. Each blade emerged veined in midnight and iridescent dusk, edges whispering like tide against shore when swung. They named the alloy Dawnglass. But forging metal would not suffice against mist that seeped through cracks man never knew he'd carved. Bran's visions guided wardens to old sites where the children once carved obsidian glyphs around weirwoods. Rhaegar's host refurbished these circles, creating new watchfires manned by Night's Watch veterans and wildling seers. Ghost paced each perimeter, white fur bristling at faint shivers in the air. Still, signs of the Forgotten multiplied. Sheep in the Vale turned rigid overnight, bodies crystalline and hollow. Farmers reported singing heard in root cellars, as if glass flutes played by unseen mouths. Rivers froze, mid-current, then thawed to reveal fish ossified in glass shells. Maesters coined a word, vitrophy, yet none dared beyond conjecture. On the winter solstice, Bran plunged into a trance beneath Winterfell's heart tree, roots curling around his legs like serpents of wood. Jon, Arya, newly returned from Braavos, as rumor gleaner. Sansa and Gendry stood watch. Bran's eyes turned pale, mouth slack. Hours passed until moon reached zenith. Then cold gale burst from the roots, extinguishing torches. Bran gasped back to himself, face streaked with sap. "I saw their cradle," he whispered. "A world of prisms, light, devouring song. They fled a vast shadow, buried themselves where fire and ice met. Valeria's bleeding wound. They did not wish to rule, only to dream. Our warmth stirs them, our hunger for coal and gold. Our dragon flame pierced their caskets. They remain few, but they call kin, scattered among stars. Menes." Arya swallowed. "We wake a sleeping hive." Bran nodded, tears silvering lashes. "We must lull them again, not slay. Break the choir conductor, the others still." Jon frowned. "You saw a leader? A singer?" Bran's hand trembled. Sketching spiral in frost. Golden eyes like slitted suns. She births crystal where her tears fall. And now, Rhaegar received Bran's omen at dawn. He convened a swift war council at Winterfell. Jon, Arya, Daenerys, Grey Worm, Lady Mage, Tormund, Sam and Asha. "We cannot invade the Doom anew," Rhaegar said. "We draw the singer out." He pointed to a map. Dragonstone circled. "If rumor holds, Valyrian vents still resonate with songs of the ancient blood. We broadcast a lure, dragon flame tempered by children's magic, the very note that awoke them. They may come." "They could level Dragonstone," Asha muttered. Daenerys met her gaze. "Then we stand upon its cliffs." Swords of dawn glass unsheathed. Sam coughed. "I discovered incantations that might weave a veil, dampening crystalline resonance once we sever the singer's voice. We require 2 channelers, one of fire, one of earth's deep memory." He looked between Daenerys and Bran. "Done," Bran said without hesitation. Jon grabbed his brother's wrist. "You barely survived last dream." "I might not survive the next," Bran answered softly. "I choose stillness where chance lets others move." Rhaegar squeezed Jon's shoulder. "If Bran stands, we stand." Dragonstone's black cliffs knifed against a slate sea, waves exploding like shattering flagons. Smiths erected iron platforms along the broken causeway, ringing them with dragonglass pylons, etched by children's glyph carvers. Melisandre's cracked ruby, kept by Rhaegar all this time, now hung upon a tripod above a brazier feeding steady ember. Flames pulsed blood red whenever winds howled from the smoking sea. On the platform's central disk, Bran settled into a weirwood throne carved from Winterfell roots, shipped by wagon across half the continent. Daenerys stood opposite, palms splayed over a copper brazier. Drogon perched on the stone drum tower, eyes twin furnaces. His siblings orbited above, keening low rumbles. Jon led watch companies along every cliff path, dawn-glass blades glinting. At sunset, Sam signaled. The veil ritual began. Bran's eyes rolled white, mouth chanting words older than speech, syllables scattering gusts of ice dust across basalt. Daenerys breathed deep, exhaled a pillar of flame that did not scorch the wood but flowed into glyph channels, igniting lines that circled the island like glowing veins. The ruby flared, echoing the pulse. Far south across the backsplash of the smoking sea, a tower of pale light answered, splitting clouds, sweeping north. Moments later, the sea between churned as though quickening. Waves reverberated glassy notes, each crest forming brief crystalline lattices. "Hold!" Rhaegar yelled against thunder. Wind tore at cloaks. Lightning forked greenish shards across horizon. From the smoke rose shapes, spires of translucent limbs, elongated torsos, whose edges shimmered prismatic. They skated the storm surge as though wind were marble, singing in scales foreign and hypnotic. Jon's heart lurched, beauty married to mortal dread. He raised Longclaw. Spears leveled. The singer strode at their head, woman from Bran's dream, hair streaming liquid gold, eyes twin suns split by serpentine pupils. She walked on water, each step crystallizing a path that dissolved behind. When she reached basalt shallows, she extended a hand. Notes tumbled from her lips, twisting air like molten glass. Bran's chant faltered as notes bored into marrow. Daenerys cried out, clutching her head. Drogon roared and loosed fire. The flame splashed harmlessly against an unseen sphere, cascading in molten ribbons that hardened to black obsidian, then fell into the sea with hiss. Rhaegar brandished Dawn. "Stand firm." He charged down causeway, dawn-glass blade blazing with reflected lightning. Behind him thundered Grey Worm and Tormund, dawn-glass axes gleaming. The singer lifted her hand again. Shards of crystal erupted from the causeway, impaling 3 shieldmen. Jon flung a spear. It pierced her shoulder, shattering into frost. She staggered, the first sign of pain, and light dimmed in one eye. Drogon swooped again. This time Daenerys regained focus, shouting Old Valyrian that braided with Bran's ice chant. Flame speared pure white. Frost spiraled pale azure, the two intertwining like lovers' ribbons around the singer. Crystal armor cracked. She screamed, a sound mixing grief and rage, and turned slitted eyes to Rhaegar. He met her gaze, and for heartbeats saw galaxies swirling, stars devoured by dark within crystal corridors. He felt her thought. Not conquest, not hatred, simply the ravenous instinct to dream undisturbed. Warmth awakened her hungers. Mankind's clamor threatened eternal sleep. "I will hush the world," she seemed to say without words. Rhaegar's voice rose over gale. "We will hush with you. Sing new lullabies." He plunged Dawn's glowing edge into the glyph-fed earth. The sword drank frost and flame until blade blazed violet. Bran's chant crescendoed. Daenerys' flame braided tighter. Ruby at tripod cracked anew, unleashing pulse that mirrored beating hearts across island. A veil of shimmering lattice sprang from Dawn's point, sweeping outward to encage the singer and her phantoms. They slammed against the veil, crystals splintered, falling as glittering snow. Each shard struck water and melted into harmless steam. The singer shrieked once more, note rising beyond human hearing, then fissured, body falling into 10,000 prisms that rained skyward like inverted hail before catching in the veil's web. There they dimmed, pulsing softer, softer, silent. The remaining phantoms quivered, their forms destabilizing like dew in sunlight. They dissolved to mist and fled beneath waves. Storms stilled. Ruby went dark. Bran exhaled, sagging. Daenerys collapsed to knees. Jon and Rhaegar caught her. The island echoed with sudden quiet, save waves gentle as lullabies. Weeks later, birds returned to Blackwater Bay. Fishermen netted cod with eyes intact. The runes on dragonglass blades dulled to inert gray. Nevertheless, watchfires burned at ward circles, and smiths continued forging dawnglass. Sleeping threats taught caution too dear to unlearn. The council reconvened beneath a mild autumn sky. Tyrell harvest barges arrived heavy. Stormland's fields yielded barley golden as dawn, and Dornish wells sang as promised thanks to Meereen's trench lore. For a first time in living memory, no levy marched across a border. Instead, ravens carried only market figures and festival invites, a harvest fair outside White Harbor, a play in King's Landing where children portrayed wolves and dragons, biting the last iron crown. Rhaegar visited that play incognito, hood shadowing silver hair. When the curtain fell and the audience cheered, a child actor playing a weirwood leaf spotted him. She pressed a prop acorn into his palm. "Plant it somewhere lonely," she whispered. "Trees like company." He smiled, tucking it inside cloak. Years slipped by. Sansa governed the north after Robb abdicated, stitching alliances of trade and grazing rights. Tyrion's memoirs inspired merchant guilds to adopt charters limiting usury. Stannis' codices became bedtime reading for aspiring bailiffs. Even Tywin found contentment of sorts, mentoring young lords in economics, while nursing vineyards near the sunset sea, soil he swore once tasted like ash, but gradually grew sweet. Jon traveled widely, envoy between council seats, his direwolf legend lingering wherever snow fell. Arya founded a free blade school in Bravos, sending promising pupils back to Westeros to guard watch circles. Bran, older before his time, remained at Winterfell, but crows still carried his murmured guidance to wardens along frost and coast alike. The world is wide. Listen. Daenerys sailed between continents, guiding free cities to abolish slave debts in exchange for goods ferried from Westeros. She returned often, and when she did, children flocked to Dragonstone's beaches to watch 3 dragons dipping over tide pools like benign storms. And Rhaegar? He planted the acorn in a cleft above the god's eye, where shattered ramparts once echoed only with ghosts. Seasons spun. Saplings sprouted crimson leaves that glowed when dawn caught them, and travelers swore its whisper sounded like harp strings. They named it Singer's Rest. Beneath its boughs Rhaegar sometimes sat at dusk, plucking quiet notes while distant bells from Harrenhal pealed the hour. One eve Jon found him there, cloak dusted by early frost. Rhaegar looked up, smile creasing lines at his eyes. "Does the realm still breathe?" Jon nodded. Breath, laughter, quarrels over barley tariffs. Life. He eyed the sapling. "Do you miss the roar?" "The roar taught us to hear hush," Rhaegar said, laying harp aside. "We guard that hush with every breath." Jon sat, back against stone. "Do you ever wonder what sleep we might disturb next?" "Always." Rhaegar gazed over Lake Mirror. "The world will wake again in new forms, but we taught it a lullaby of ice and fire sung together. That melody lasts beyond our throats." A breeze rustled red leaves. They shimmered, catching starlight. The 2 men listened, hearing perhaps distant hooves of tomorrow's problems, but also the steady pulse of a realm that, for once, had learned to mend faster than it broke. And if somewhere on another horizon glass dreamed or shadows conspired, they would meet those songs in duet. Steel and mercy, flame and frost, joined again without need for crowns, only resolve. Stars wheeled. Harp strings cooled. The hush endured.